What's up guys, and today is the day we talk about my top 5 games for 2020.
What are you talking about? It's July!
No big fancy introduction here, but for the sake of any new viewers, I will point out that this top 5 isn't for games made in 2020, but instead for games I played for this channel during 2020. I rarely play any games the year it drops, so this format just works out better for me. Also, this list includes both games I reviewed, as well as games I spotlighted during that time period. So, with all that said, let's get started. Number 5. Last Evil. Sadly, the only H-game rep this time around. Spoiler alert I guess. But Last Evil was my first real dive into the card-based roguelike genre, aka Slay the Spire clones. And I was not disappointed. The 3D might not look that good if I'm honest, but it really makes up for it in gameplay, being this succubus dungeon crawler where you can charm, curse, and screw your way to victory. And while normally I'm not that interested in succubus simulators, Last Evil really leans into the power fantasy of such a title, casting powerful magic and restoring vitality by consuming vitality. I think one of the strongest benefits this game has though is its RPG combat system, allowing for H content to happen without forcing a pause in gameplay. You can be bouncing on top of someone while simultaneously casting death magic at the poor victim's friends, or use that time to build up defenses for your next strategy. I do think the customization and perk trees leave a bit to be desired, and sadly from what I heard, the game only got one more stage before the dev closed up shop on the title, but what is on offer is pretty good, and does make me want to experience more card-based roguelike titles. If you are into H games, this one is a must-buy, and would probably be higher on the list if it was exclusively a top 5 for adult titles. There really isn't a feeling quite like seeing one of those annoying healer formations and just going, "Hey you." Huh?
I can suck your dick.
Deal. Number 4. Fightin' Rage. A spotlighted title makes the list, and I am still shocked by how much fun I had for around $4. As a beat 'em up experience, it elevates my expectations from its brethren. Like, there is just so much content I didn't expect this little title to have. Being able to save background characters, the combo system, unlocking alternate paths. Hell, one of the comments for that video pointed out that at the very beginning, I could have simply turned around to play another hidden route. And the parry mechanics? Mwah. Chef's kiss on that one. The game has so much fun energy attached to it that again, I just didn't expect, and a surprising amount of sexiness thrown in to a game made somewhat recently. One of the best random finds I come across, and I highly recommend trying it out, especially since it's so cheap.
Oh no!
Number 3. Haiti. By far the biggest surprise in the list, Resident Evil style horror games are not my cup of tea at all, and yet Haiti was incredibly fun to go through, stressful as hell at times, but really damn fun. It mixes those Resident Evil aspects with puzzle platforming and a completely out of their main character design to great success in my opinion. Going through the labyrinth-like facility, getting lost, constantly hounded by soulless robots, sounds like a terrible time, but it was with this title that I learned why people enjoyed the classic Resident Evil games, without dealing with the classic Resident Evil games camera. The game does come across as a sort of indie tech demo though, so I will say that if you really want a proper modern classic RE experience, bit of a word salad there, then the remake would be more advised. But this game was pretty solid, though maybe not $14.99 solid, again tech demo. And I have great hopes for the sequel that I do plan to try out one day, but I will admit that face is a bit of a tough pill to swallow. As you play, Haiti has to sprint through countless corridors, shimmy across bottomless cliffs, pull herself onto ledges, accurately gun down assailants, pull herself onto ledges, crawl through small passageways, pull herself onto ledges, crawl through small Number 2. Risk of Rain 2. Risk of Rain 2 at number 2. Not what I initially expected last year. I basically locked this game in as my number 1, but well, circumstances changed. Don't let that sway you though, this game got my number 2 for a reason. The fun per dollar equation here is awe-inspiring, holding my attention for basically the entire year of its release, plus another half of a year back in early access. Risk of Rain 1 was, I think, my introduction to roguelikes in general, or at least games with heavily randomized elements, and the sequel improves on just about all of the elements in the original. All the important stuff is way better. Stage exploration, items, equipment, survivors, they all benefit greatly from the shift to 3D. Though I do think the music was cooler in the original. And they never added in My Boo the Enforcer into the game proper, instead leaving him in the limbo of a lore cameo. Or at least that's what I would say if not for the magic of mods. Mods are what really solidify the package in my opinion, though not to the levels of solidification that I had hoped. The game feels like a really good fit for modding, but while initially there was a boom of mods with meaningful new additional content, I myself even tried my hand at creating one, though I may have inadvertently contributed to the modding Discord's adamant hatred of anything League of Legends. As time went by, those sort of mods became fewer and fewer in number. Like, while there is a basic framework for stages, I don't think anyone actually made a solid additional stage. And the Enforcer mod creator removed the Big Titty Enforcer waifu skin. So yeah, modding didn't take off nearly as much as I had hoped, but take it from someone who tried their hand at it, multiplayer networking makes things so much more annoying, so I fully understand. Who knows about the future though, as more and more tools are becoming available to help newer modders. But despite the modding not blowing up like I had hoped, Risk of Rain 2 is still a really good product. It is well worth anyone's time who hasn't already tried it out, especially if you like the idea of starting out as a weak survivor scrounging for scraps on an alien planet and growing into a god of destruction over the course of about 45 minutes.
The usual, sir.
Honorable mention, Azure Lane. No dishonorable mention this time, guys. Nothing really stood out as being worth putting in that slot. I mean, sure, Smashing the Battle was a game, but I knew exactly what it was going in there, so that's not fair. And you guys should know that while I will criticize a game, I do not particularly enjoy doing so. So anyways, Azure Lane. Honorable mention because, well, I'm growing a bit distant to mobile games in general. I don't know, maybe the fire to finally find one that really gels with me will light again one day, but I think the gaming landscape nowadays has damaged my faith in any game that is in permanent development rather than selling a product to the consumer for them to do as they please. With that said, Azure Lane is still by far the most consumer-friendly gacha game that I have experienced, and probably contributed to me not crawling back to FGO. I mean, playing a game knowing that it has BS drop rates in a vacuum is massively different from playing it after experiencing a game that, you know, wants people to get the new units. Like, for context, when I stopped actively playing Azure Lane, I kind of felt that I could come back at any time since they were starting to add some event reruns to a permanent section in the game, available for anyone who missed the events. That sort of thing really took the pressure off of leaving the game and coming back, because I knew that if I missed out on something, it would eventually make its way back to me, instead of other games where there is a very real chance of it disappearing into the void forever. It also has the advantage of being a much more unique gacha game experience, being a Toho style bullet hell game instead of being yet another RPG. Not saying RPGs are bad, but you have to respect a developer for working outside the box. I enjoyed my time with Azure Lane, despite the game not being a genre I particularly like, but ultimately never really got the meta game surrounding it. And that's what prevented me from liking it enough to give it a proper spot on the list. Azure Lane is a game I'd say to give a shot to for anyone who doesn't have a preferred gacha game, and also for those who have one, but feel like they might be in a more abusive consumer-developer relationship than they like. You never know. Plus, the waifus are pretty solid despite them straying away from their mecha roots in their skins. Fun note, Indianapolis does not notice that she's sitting on a goddamn nuke because the real crew of the Indianapolis did not fully know what they were transporting in World War II. Also, she doesn't like I-58 because the sub sunk her in World War II. Haha, that's a little fun reference to the real life events. Wait, I-58 says she really did sink Indy. Wait, Indianapolis is dead in this universe? Did World War II happen? Did it happen with the real ships or the ship girls? I thought the ship girls were alternate universe versions of the ships. Are they reincarnations?
Don't ask questions.
Number 1, Bayonetta. This is what dethroned Risk of Rain 2 at the 11th hour, and I mean 11th hour, like the review date is literally on the 31st of December. I was locked in for Risk of Rain 2 to be my number 1 pick, and then randomly thought, hey, Bayonetta is on Steam. Kinda like that game, right? My list was revised by Stage 2. If you are like me, and I have to assume you are to some degree, this is a very niche YouTube channel, you love fanservice, and this is an example of a perfect fanservice game. Because that's the thing, all jokes aside, most of the time fanservice games, and to be honest most anime games in general, trade some functionality for their more anime or fanservice-y aspects. Bayonetta does not. And that might be because it is in fact a rare example of a AAA quality fanservice title, the white whale of fanservice fans. All that budget put into a BDSM-clad video game character who pole dances and strips naked to finish off her enemies? The animations, the camera angles, the gameplay? We will probably never get this again. And that's the thing that really makes this the number 1 for me. The professional quality fanservice mixed with the professional quality gameplay. At first glance, it might seem like just another mash attack button and finish enemies off with some style type hack and slash game, but that's only the surface level. When you really bite into the game, then you learn just how much control you really have over the flow of action. A development style Platinum intentionally does for all their games, for better or worse. Want to do that cool pole dancing attack on demand? Use the torture attack on the enemy with a staff to force it to drop the weapon. Want to do a specific part of your attack string without going through the entire sequence? Use panther canceling to skip all the way to the spinning heel drop. You don't even need to slow down time to beat this game, and when you get that skilled, you will feel like an absolute god, just like how Bayonetta herself probably does. And isn't that what video games are all about? Feeling good and enjoying yourself? Plus, as much as I talk about skill and complexity, it's still beatable even without being good at it. It even has a one-handed mode to help less skilled people out. Man, the early 2000s was a much more fun time for gaming. Of course, there is a bit of nostalgia goggles at play here, I will admit, but truth be told, I'm not nearly as susceptible to that as one might be. There are plenty of games that I love, but still hold back on playing due to their age really showing in certain areas. But Bayonetta is lucky enough to not be that old. It still looks good, though not to the level of like DMC5, it still plays good, though the cameras do have some pain points, and in terms of content there's a decent amount of stuff to do, though the minigames can be a bit of a mixed bag. It does have a bit of an experimental feel to it, but to the game's credit that contributes to just how out of there the game is allowed to be, especially with the hindsight of Bayonetta 2 existing, and that being a more refined, but at times less unique and more reserved experience. Bayonetta 2 doesn't get to have a random ass dance sequence at the very end. Ultimately, Bayonetta is to me a shining example of both what fanservice games should strive to be and an example of how creative video games were back during that time. It's a game that can stand on its own purely through gameplay, but also including fanservice in a way that's not simply thrown in, but built into its very soul to the point that separating the two would create a completely different product. It is truly one of a kind and an experience that should be celebrated even now, over 10 years later. And that is why Bayonetta 1 is my favorite game I played in 2020. Okay, list over. Back to work on the next review I go. But I do want to try something with my videos going forward. Obviously, let me know your thoughts on the games I talk about in the comment section below, plus like, Patreon, subscribe star, all that mess. But might I suggest putting in the comment section games that you think are similar to what I've talked about? I recently had a discussion with some friends about how annoyed I get that only the most obvious games are recommended when someone's looking for a similar experience to something they played. So if you know of a game similar to the games I covered, leave it in the comment section. Maybe there is a Slay the Spire type game out there with fanservice or adult content that isn't Last Evil. Or maybe there's an indie Bayonetta out there that no one pays attention to because, you know, both Bayonetta and Devil May Cry exist. Always good to learn about less known titles. Either way, I'll see you guys next time. Matane.